Give Jake your Honda or pack your bags, Marcus. Tonight. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest as I stood frozen in the doorway of our living room, still holding the birthday cake my coworker had surprised me with at the office. 28 candles, chocolate frosting, and "Happy Birthday, Marcus," written in blue icing, the only acknowledgement of my birthday I'd received all day. The room was packed with relatives, neighbors, and Jake's college friends, all here to celebrate his acceptance to State University. Red and gold streamers hung from every corner, balloons bobbed near the ceiling, and a massive banner reading, "Congratulations, Jake," stretched across the entire wall. My father Frank stood in the center of it all, beer in hand, his chest puffed out with pride as he delivered his ultimatum. My mother Sandra was beside him, her arms crossed, that familiar look of righteous determination on her face. Jake, golden-haired and athletic, sat on the couch surrounded by his admirers, his face flushed with embarrassment, but his mouth firmly shut. Not a word of protest. Not a single word in my defense. The room had gone dead silent, dozens of eyes boring into me, waiting for my response. My hands started trembling as I set the cake down on the side table next to a pile of gift bags. All for Jake, of course. The Honda Civic parked outside wasn't just a car. It was freedom. It was independence. It was the first thing I'd ever truly owned, bought with my own money after 2 years of overtime shifts and weekend work. And now, on my 28th birthday, my father was demanding I hand it over like it was some family asset to be redistributed at will. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that hidden in my laptop upstairs was a folder labeled insurance policy, containing 3 years' worth of bank statements, loan documents, and evidence that would shatter their perfect family facade forever. In that moment, standing there with cake frosting under my fingernails and the taste of humiliation in my mouth, I realized this wasn't just about the car. This was the final test, the last chance for them to show they saw me as more than a walking ATM. And as I looked at my father's expectant face, my mother's manipulative smile, and my brother's cowardly silence, I felt something inside me break. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the last chain that had been keeping me tethered to this house of lies. The story of how I got here starts with a simple lie, the one I told myself every day. I lived at home to save money for my future. That's what I told my coworkers, my friends, even myself. But the truth was darker and more pathetic. I was a 28-year-old man trapped in a financial prison of my own making, subsidizing my family's lifestyle, while they treated me like an unwanted house guest. The rent I paid them monthly was more than most apartments in town. The grocery money I contributed could have fed a family of 6. The mysterious household expenses that kept appearing on my credit card statements would have made a financial advisor weep. But tonight, as I stood in that living room full of Jake's celebration, I knew the charade was over. 3 years of documentation, 3 years of careful record-keeping, 3 years of building my case. It was all about to pay off. Because while my father thought he was delivering an ultimatum, he had no idea that I was about to serve him one that would destroy everything he held dear. The golden child was about to lose his throne, and the family bank account, my bank account, was about to close forever. The silence in the room stretched on like a taut wire ready to snap. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, someone's nervous cough, the distant hum of the refrigerator. My father's eyes were locked on mine, that familiar mixture of authority and condescension that had ruled my life for nearly 3 decades. He expected me to crumble, to apologize, to hand over the keys with a forced smile like I always did. That's how our family worked. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who sacrificed so Jake could shine. "Well?" Frank demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're all waiting, Marcus. Your brother needs reliable transportation for his commute to campus. You make good money now. You can get another car. This is about family." Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. I glanced around the room at the faces staring back at me. My Aunt Rebecca, who always favored Jake. My Uncle Tom, who'd borrowed $500 from me last Christmas and never mentioned it again. My grandmother, who'd somehow forgotten it was my birthday, despite calling Jake 3 times this week to congratulate him on college. "No," I said quietly, the word falling into the silence like a stone into still water. My mother Sandra gasped dramatically, her hand flying to her chest. "Marcus, don't be selfish. This is a big opportunity for your brother. You should be supporting him, not holding him back with your petty jealousies." Petty jealousies. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Jake was sprawled on the couch like a king holding court. his girlfriend Emma stroking his hair while his buddies from the football team nodded along with our parents' demands. He'd never worked a real job in his life, never paid a bill, never wondered where his next meal was coming from. His biggest worry was which party to attend on Friday night, while I'd been carrying this family's financial burden since I turned 25. I said no, I repeated louder this time. The Honda is mine. I bought it. I make the payments on it. It's not a family decision. Frank's face darkened, the vein in his forehead starting to throb the way it did when he was about to lose his temper. Son, you're living under my roof, eating food I provide, food you provide? The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Dad, when's the last time you actually paid for groceries in this house? The question hung in the air like an accusation. My mother's face went pale, and I saw several relatives exchange confused glances. They didn't know. Of course they didn't know. The perfect family image my parents projected to the world was built on my silence, my complicity, my willingness to be the invisible foundation holding up their house of cards. That's enough, Sandra snapped, her voice sharp with panic. You're embarrassing yourself, Marcus, and you're embarrassing us. Just give Jake the car, and we can all move on with the celebration. But I was done moving on, done being embarrassed, done being the family's dirty little secret. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app, my fingers moving with steady precision despite the tremor in my hands. Embarrassing? I said, my voice gaining strength. Let's talk about embarrassing. Let's talk about the $1,500 you transferred out of my savings account last month for Jake's spring break trip to Cancun. Or the $3,000 you took the month before that for the new dining room set. Jake shot up from the couch, his face flushing red. What are you talking about? He's making things up, Frank said quickly, but his voice had lost its authority. Marcus has always had a vivid imagination. I held up my phone, the screen displaying my bank statement with crystal clarity. Want to see the transactions, Dad? I've got screenshots of everything. 3 years worth. Every withdrawal, every emergency loan that was never repaid, every time you raided my account while I was at work. The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. My Aunt Rebecca was staring at my parents with dawning horror, while Uncle Tom suddenly found his shoes very interesting. Jake's girlfriend Emma had gone completely silent, her hand frozen in his hair as she processed what she was hearing. You gave them access to your bank account? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't give them anything, I replied, my voice steady now, powered by 3 years of suppressed rage. They took it. Joint account holder privileges, they said. For emergencies only, they said. To help me manage my money better, they said. Sandra was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the manipulative tears she'd perfected over the years, the ones designed to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. Marcus, honey, we're family. Everything we did was to help you, to help all of us. We were just stealing, I finished for her. The word you're looking for is stealing. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I walked over to the mantle where our family photos were displayed. All those perfect Christmas mornings, vacation shots, graduations where Jake was front and center and I was barely visible in the background. I picked up the most recent one, from Jake's high school graduation, and looked at our smiling faces. Such a happy family, such a beautiful lie. You want to talk about family? I said, setting the photo back down. Fine, let's have a real family conversation. I headed toward the stairs, ignoring my father's shouts, my mother's pleas, and the confused chatter of our guests. I had a date with my laptop, with 3 years of evidence, and with a plan I'd been perfecting since the day I first noticed money missing from my account. Tonight, the golden child was going to learn what it really cost to be the favorite, and my parents were about to discover that their reliable, compliant son had been keeping very detailed records of just how unreliable and non-compliant they'd been with his money. The family meeting was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was going to be the one setting the agenda. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and purpose I'd never felt before. Behind me, I could hear Frank's voice booming through the house, demanding I come back down and stop this nonsense. Sandra was sobbing loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear, wailing about how I was destroying the family on what should have been Jake's special day. The guests were murmuring amongst themselves, probably wondering if they should leave or stay for the show. Let them wonder. Let them all see what their perfect family really looked like when the mask came off. My bedroom was at the end of the hallway, the smallest room in the house, despite being the only one paying actual bills around here. While Jake had the master bedroom with the attached bathroom and walk-in closet, I'd been relegated to what was essentially a glorified storage closet with a window. But tonight, that cramped space was going to become mission control for the most important presentation of my life. I fired up my laptop and navigated to the folder I'd hidden deep in my files, protected by 3 different passwords and labeled innocuously as Tax Documents 2019-2022. But inside wasn't tax information. It was 3 years of methodical documentation that would have made a forensic accountant proud. Bank statements with highlighted unauthorized transfers, screenshots of my account being accessed from my parents' devices while I was at work, photos of expensive purchases that mysteriously appeared in the house after money disappeared from my savings. The evidence was overwhelming, and I'd organized it all into a presentation that would have made my corporate training manager weep with pride. 37 slides of pure, undeniable truth, complete with charts, graphs, and a running total that would make Jake's college tuition look like pocket change. I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Frank, no doubt coming to drag me back down and force me to apologize. But I was ready for him. I'd been ready for this moment for months. Marcus! He burst through my door without knocking, his face purple with rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? You get back down there right now and give your brother those keys. Sit down, Dad, I said calmly, not looking up from my laptop screen. We need to talk. We don't need to talk about anything. You're going to march downstairs, apologize to your brother and our guests, and hand over that car. Sit down. My voice was steel now, cold and unyielding in a way that made him pause. Because what I'm about to show you is going to change everything, and you're going to want to be sitting when you see it. Something in my tone must have gotten through to him because he hesitated, his bluster deflating slightly. Sandra appeared in the doorway behind him, mascara streaked down her cheeks, with Jake hovering uncertainly behind her. What's this about, Marcus? She asked, her voice shaky. Why are you acting like this? This isn't like you. No, I agreed, turning the laptop screen toward them. The old Marcus would have handed over the keys and apologized for causing a scene, but the old Marcus didn't know about this. The screen displayed my banking app with the last 3 months of transactions highlighted in red. Their faces went white as they saw the numbers. $800 here, $200 there, $2, $500 for something labeled family emergency that I'd never been told about. This is just the tip of the iceberg, I continued, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Do you want to see what 3 years of this looks like? Do you want to see the grand total of what your financial help has cost me? Jake pushed past our parents, staring at the screen in confusion. I don't understand. What is this? This, I said, clicking to the next slide, is where your spring break money came from, and your new laptop, and your car insurance, and pretty much everything else you've enjoyed for the past 3 years. The slide showed a comprehensive breakdown of Jake's expenses, all traced back to money that had been taken from my account, the gaming setup in his room, $800 from my savings, his car insurance for the past 2 years, $3, $600, the spring break trip he'd just returned from, $1, $500, even the designer clothes he was wearing to tonight's party, $400 charge to my credit card while I was at work. That's not possible, Jake whispered, his face draining of color. Mom and Dad paid for all that. They said you were just helping with some bills, not paying for my stuff. Helping with bills? I laughed bitterly. Jake, I've been paying for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, your expenses, their credit card payments, everything. They haven't made a real financial contribution to this household in over 2 years. Sandra collapsed into my desk chair, her face buried in her hands. Marcus, you don't understand. We were going through a rough patch. Your father's commission was down and we just needed some temporary help. Temporary? I clicked to the next slide, showing a timeline that stretched back 3 years. Mom, this has been going on since I moved back home. You told me I was living here to save money for my future, but really I was here to subsidize yours. Frank's jaw was working like he was chewing glass. Son, we're family. Family helps each other. When you make more money, you help out those who need it. That's how it works. And how much help have I received in return? I asked, clicking through more slides. When I needed help with my student loans, where were you? When I wanted to take that certification course to advance my career, who told me I couldn't afford it? When I mentioned wanting to get my own apartment, who convinced me I needed to stay here and be responsible, Each question was a hammer blow, and I could see them crumbling under the weight of their own hypocrisy. But I wasn't done yet. The nuclear option was still coming, saved for last like the grand finale of a fireworks show. "Here's the best part," I said, my voice dripping with venom as I clicked to the final slide. "The money you've been taking from me, it wasn't just my salary, it was my inheritance." The slide displayed the trust fund statements my grandfather had left me. $45 that was supposed to be released when I turned 25. Money that had been systematically drained by my parents over the past 3 years, with Frank listed as the trustee who authorized every withdrawal. Jake's legs gave out, and he sank onto my bed. "Grandpa's money? You spent Marcus's inheritance money? We invested it in the family," Frank said weakly. But all the fight had gone out of him. We were going to pay it back when things got better. "When?" I asked, standing up from my chair. "When were you going to pay back the $68,000 you've stolen from me? When were you going to tell Jake that his college lifestyle was built on his brother's future? When were you going to admit that your golden child is nothing more than an expensive hobby I've been forced to fund?" The number hung in the air like a physical presence. $68,000. Enough for a down payment on a house. Enough to pay off my student loans and start fresh. Enough to build the life I'd been dreaming of while I was trapped in this house, subsidizing theirs. "I never asked for any of this," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted this. If I'd known." "But you didn't know," I said, my anger finally cooling into something harder and more permanent. "Because they never told you. They let you think you deserved it all, that you were special, that you were worth more than your brother who was working 60-hour weeks to pay for your princess lifestyle." I closed the laptop with a decisive snap. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm moving out. Tonight. I'm taking my car, my belongings, and what's left of my dignity, and I'm never coming back." "Marcus, please," Sandra sobbed. "We can work this out. We're family." "No," I said, already pulling my suitcase out of the closet. "Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. Family doesn't build one child's happiness on another child's financial ruin." I started throwing clothes into the suitcase, my movements sharp and efficient. 3 years of planning had led to this moment, and I wasn't going to let emotion derail me now. "You can keep the house you can't afford. You can figure out how to pay Jake's college tuition without my inheritance money. You can explain to the family downstairs why your son is leaving on his birthday. But you'll do it all without me." Behind me, I could hear Sandra crying and Frank trying to salvage some shred of authority, demanding I stay and work this out like adults. But their voices were already fading, becoming background noise to the sound of my own liberation. The golden child era was over. The family bank was officially closed, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Wilson was about to start living for himself. The sound of my suitcase zipping shut was like the closing of a chapter. 3 years of careful documentation. 3 years of swallowed pride. 3 years of being the invisible foundation holding up their house of cards. And it all came down to this moment in my cramped bedroom while a birthday party raged downstairs for the brother who'd unknowingly been living off my stolen inheritance. Frank was pacing now, his hands running through his graying hair, while Sandra had progressed from manipulative tears to full-blown panic. Jake sat on my bed like a statue, staring at his hands as the reality of his subsidized life crashed down around him. The golden child was finally seeing the price tag on his crown, and it was written in his brother's blood. "Marcus, son, let's be reasonable here," Frank said, his voice taking on that false calm he used when he was trying to regain control. "You're upset, I get it, but you can't just leave. This is your home, we're your family. We can set up a payment plan, make this right." "A payment plan?" I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter in the small room. "Dad, at minimum wage, it would take you 4 years to pay back what you've stolen from me. And that's assuming you stopped spending my money today, which we both know you won't." I pulled my laptop bag over my shoulder and grabbed the plastic container with my important documents: birth certificate, social security card, passport. Everything I needed to start over. Everything that proved I existed independent of this family's twisted financial web. "Where will you go?" Sandra asked, her voice breaking. "You don't have anywhere to go." That was the moment I realized just how little they knew about my life outside these walls. They saw me as an extension of their household, a financial resource that came home every night and deposited money into their accounts. They had no idea about my friendships, my plans, my life beyond their exploitation. "I have options," I said simply. "More options than you might think." The truth was, I'd been quietly preparing for this day for months. My friend Derek from work had offered me his spare room multiple times, and my savings account, the one they didn't have access to, the one I'd opened secretly 6 months ago, had enough for a security deposit on my own place. I'd been funneling money into it slowly, carefully, like a prisoner saving tools for an escape. "What about your job?" Frank asked desperately. "You can't just throw away your career because you're having a tantrum." "My job?" I turned to face him, and the look in my eyes must have been colder than I'd ever shown them before because he actually took a step back. "My job is the one thing in my life that's actually mine. My boss respects me, my coworkers appreciate me, and my paycheck, what's left of it after you two finish shopping, goes toward building my future, not subsidizing your delusions of middle-class comfort." I moved toward the door, but Jake suddenly stood up, blocking my path. For a moment, I thought he was going to try to stop me, to side with our parents in one final act of golden child privilege. But when he spoke, his voice was small and broken. How much of my college fund was really mine? The question hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Sandra's sobbing stopped abruptly, and Frank's face went gray. They all knew the answer, but Jake needed to hear it. "None of it," I said quietly. "Your college fund was my inheritance, every semester's tuition, every dorm fee, every meal plan. It's all been coming from the money Grandpa left me." Jake's face crumpled, and for the first time since we were children, I felt genuinely sorry for him. He'd been living a lie just as much as I had, only he'd been on the benefiting side of it. The golden child had just discovered that his entire life was fool's gold. "I'll pay it back," he whispered. "I'll get a job. I'll drop out if I have to. No," I said firmly. "You won't drop out. You'll finish college, you'll get your degree, and you'll build a life for yourself. But you'll do it knowing what it really costs, and you'll do it without my money." I looked at each of them one last time. Frank with his defeated posture, Sandra with her mascara-streaked face, Jake with his world shattered around him. 3 years ago, I would have felt guilty for causing them pain. Tonight, I felt nothing but relief. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've already called Uncle Robert." Frank's head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror. Uncle Robert was Frank's older brother, the successful one, the one who'd always looked down on Frank's financial struggles. More importantly, Uncle Robert was an attorney who specialized in financial crimes. "Marcus, you didn't—" Sandra started. "I sent him copies of everything," I continued, my voice steady. "The bank statements, the trust fund documents, the evidence of unauthorized access to my accounts. He's reviewing it all tonight." "You called a lawyer on your own family?" Frank's voice was a broken whisper. "No," I corrected. "I called a lawyer because someone has been systematically stealing from me for 3 years, and that someone happens to share my DNA." Uncle Robert's first question was whether I wanted to press charges. I told him I'd think about it. The color drained from Frank's face so quickly I thought he might faint. Sandra made a choking sound, and Jake looked like he was going to be sick. "The only reason I haven't decided to press charges yet is because I want to see what happens next," I continued. "How you explain this to the family, how you plan to pay for Jake's education now that your personal ATM is closed, how you're going to manage your lifestyle without my income propping it up." I moved past Jake and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Sandra starting to hyperventilate and Frank trying to calm her down while simultaneously panicking himself. The family that had been celebrating Jake's bright future 20 minutes ago was now facing the reality of their financial house of cards collapsing. As I reached the top of the stairs, I could hear the murmur of confused voices from the living room. The guests were still there, probably wondering where the birthday boy's family had disappeared to and why the celebration had stopped so abruptly. They were about to get their answer. I descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, my suitcase in one hand and my car keys in the other. The living room fell silent as I appeared, dozens of eyes tracking my movement as I walked toward the front door. My Aunt Rebecca started to say something, but the look on my face stopped her. At the door, I turned back to face the room full of relatives, family friends, and Jake's college buddies. These people had watched me grow up, had seen me graduate, had celebrated my achievements with polite applause while reserving their real enthusiasm for Jake. Tonight, they were finally going to see the real family dynamic. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Jake's college acceptance," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I'm sure my parents will explain why I won't be staying for the rest of the party, or for any future family gatherings." I opened the front door, feeling the cool night air on my face like freedom itself. "Happy birthday to me," I said to no one in particular, and walked out into the night. Behind me, I heard the explosion of voices as the guests realized something monumental had just happened. Questions, Demands for explanation, the sound of Sandra's breakdown echoing from upstairs, but I didn't look back. I was done being the supporting character in their drama. The Honda Civic was parked in the driveway, surrounded by cars belonging to Jake's celebration guests. As I loaded my belongings into the back, I could see faces pressed against the living room windows, watching the show. Let them watch. Let them see what happened when the family bank finally closed its doors. I drove away from the house I'd been financially supporting for 3 years, leaving behind the family that had never seen me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. In my rearview mirror, I could see the lights of the party still glowing, but for the first time in years, I wasn't paying the electric bill. The golden child could learn to live without his brother's money. It was time for Marcus Wilson to start living with his own. 3 months later, I was sitting in my own apartment, a real apartment with my name on the lease and my money paying the rent, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jake's name, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail like I had with Frank and Sandra's increasingly desperate calls, but something made me answer. "Hello, Jake. Marcus." His voice was different, quieter, more mature somehow. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I needed to call. I needed you to know some things." I leaned back in my second-hand armchair, looking around my small but completely mind-living space. "I'm listening." "I dropped out," he said simply. I couldn't keep going, knowing that every class, every meal, every moment I spent there was bought with money they stole from you. That surprised me. The golden child giving up his throne willingly. "Jake, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," he interrupted. "Marcus, I've been going to therapy since that night, trying to understand how I could have been so blind to what was happening right in front of me, and the therapist helped me see that staying in college pretending none of this happened would have made me complicit in the theft." I didn't say anything, letting him continue. "I got a job," Jake went on. "It's not glamorous. I'm working construction for Uncle Robert's friend. 60 hours a week, and every penny goes toward paying you back. It'll take me years, but I'm going to do it." "Jake, no, let me finish. I also wanted you to know that Mom and Dad are—" He paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "They're not doing well. Dad lost his job at the hardware store after Uncle Robert had a conversation with his boss about the family situation. And she's been drinking. A lot." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness at this news. Justice served, but at a cost I wasn't sure I was comfortable with. "The house is going into foreclosure," Jake continued. "Turns out without your money, they can't afford the mortgage payments. They're going to have to sell, probably at a loss." "Where will they go?" "Aunt Rebecca offered them her basement, but Dad's too proud. He keeps saying this is all temporary, that you'll come back, that you'll forgive them, and everything will go back to normal." "And what do you think?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I think he's living in a fantasy. I think they broke something that can't be fixed. And honestly, I think maybe that's for the best." That evening, I met my friend Derek at our usual bar. He'd been my lifeline during those first chaotic weeks after leaving home, offering me his couch until I found my own place and listening to my story without judgment. As we sat nursing our beers, I told him about Jake's call. "So the golden child fell from grace," Derek said, shaking his head. "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," I admitted. "Part of me is glad he's finally seeing the truth, but part of me feels bad that his entire world collapsed." "Don't," Derek said firmly. "That world was built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. It was always going to collapse eventually. At least this way, Jake has a chance to build something real." I took a sip of my beer, considering his words. His therapist is right, you know. If he'd stayed in college, pretending everything was fine, he would have been just as guilty as our parents. And now? Now he's working construction, living in a studio apartment, and paying me back $20 a week. I laughed, but it wasn't bitter anymore. It'll take him 17 years at that rate to pay off what they stole, but he's actually doing it. Derek raised his glass. "To little brothers who grow up." 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My grandmother Eleanor, Frank's mother, had driven 3 hours from her retirement community to see me. My boss, understanding the gravity of the situation, let me take the afternoon off to talk with her. We sat in a quiet coffee shop near my building, and she listened as I told her the whole story. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "I failed you," she said finally. "I failed both you and Jake by not seeing what Frank was doing." "Grandma, you couldn't have known." "I should have known," she interrupted. "I should have asked more questions about how they were affording everything. Should have wondered why you were still living at home at 28. I let myself believe their stories because it was easier than confronting the truth about my son. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This won't make up for what they took from you, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $10,000. I can't accept this, I said, trying to hand it back. You can and you will, she said firmly. It's not charity, Marcus. It's justice, and there's more coming. I'm changing my will. Frank was supposed to inherit my house, but that's going to you now. He's proven he can't be trusted with money. I stared at the check, my eyes blurring with tears I didn't expect. Grandma, your grandfather would have been proud of you, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Standing up for yourself, demanding accountability, refusing to be a victim. That takes real strength. As I drove home that evening, I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger that had sustained me through those first months of independence was fading, replaced by something healthier, hope. I wasn't just surviving without my family's dysfunction. I was thriving. My savings account was growing for the first time in years. My apartment was small but comfortable, decorated with things I'd chosen for myself. My work was recognized and valued by people who saw me as more than a walking wallet. I was building relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. The golden child had fallen, but it wasn't a tragedy. It was a liberation. For both of us. That night, I sat on my small balcony, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the phone call I would make tomorrow. Not to Frank or Sandra. They'd made their choices and would have to live with the consequences. But to Jake, to tell him I was proud of him for choosing the hard path, for building something real from the ruins of his privileged life. The family bank was closed forever, but something better was being built from its ashes. Actual relationships based on truth, respect, and genuine care. It had taken 28 years, but Marcus Wilson was finally learning what real family looked like, and it looked nothing like the house I'd walked away from on my birthday. 6 months after my 28th birthday, I received a call that would close the final chapter of my old life. Uncle Robert's voice was professional but warm as he delivered the news I'd been waiting for. Marcus, I wanted to give you an update on your parents' situation. They've officially declared bankruptcy. The house sold at auction yesterday. They lost it for about $30,000 less than they owed. I sat in my own kitchen, in my own chair, drinking coffee from a mug I'd bought myself, and felt nothing but a quiet sense of closure. They've also agreed to make restitution, Uncle Robert continued. It won't be the full amount, obviously, but Frank signed an agreement to pay you back $300 a month for the next 10 years. It's legally binding this time, and if he misses payments, then we proceed with criminal charges. I made that very clear to him. After hanging up, I realized that the chapter was finally, truly, closed. The family that had built their lifestyle on my stolen future was facing the consequences of their choices, while I was building something real and honest from the ground up. That evening, I had dinner plans with Jake, a monthly tradition we'd started after he'd proven his commitment to making amends. He looked different now, leaner from the physical work. More serious, but somehow more genuine. The entitled college boy was gone, replaced by a man who understood the value of earning what he had. I heard about the bankruptcy, he said as we sat across from each other at a modest restaurant. How do you feel about it? I considered the question carefully. Relieved, I said finally. Not happy, not vindicated, just relieved that it's over. Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. I've been thinking about something the therapist said. She told me that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is letting them face the consequences of their actions. That by protecting them from those consequences, we're actually enabling them to keep hurting themselves and others. She's right, I agreed. I spent 3 years protecting them from the reality of their financial situation. All I did was make it worse. And now? Now they have to learn to live within their means. Maybe that's the best thing that could have happened to them. As we talked, I realized how much Jake had changed. The golden child swagger was gone, replaced by humility and genuine remorse. He'd taken responsibility not just financially, but emotionally, working through his guilt, his privilege, and his role in the family dynamic that had hurt us all. I got my GED, he said suddenly. I'm going to start taking community college classes part-time in the fall. It'll take longer to get my degree, but I'll pay for it myself. That's great, Jake. I'm proud of you. I also wanted to tell you something else, he said, his voice becoming more serious. I've been talking to other people our age about their families, their relationships with their parents. And Marcus, what happened to us isn't normal. The way they treated you, the way they used you, that's not how families are supposed to work. I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. For years, I'd wondered if I was being too sensitive, too demanding, if this was just how families operated. Having Jake confirm that our situation had been abnormal was validating in a way I hadn't expected. "I know," I said. "It took me a long time to realize that. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I let them use me as a weapon against you. You were just a kid, Jake. You didn't know any better. But I should have. I should have questioned why you were working so much but never seemed to have any money. I should have wondered why you never bought anything for yourself. I should have noticed that every good thing in my life came with a cost for you." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two brothers who'd found their way back to each other through the wreckage of their family's dysfunction. A year later, I was promoted to senior project manager at my company. The raise was substantial, and for the first time in my adult life, every penny of it was mine to decide how to spend. I used part of it to buy my grandmother a plane ticket to visit me, and we spent a wonderful weekend together in my new 2-bedroom apartment. "You've built something beautiful here," she said, looking around at the home I'd created. "Not just the apartment, the life. You've built a life that's entirely your own." She was right. My relationships were healthy and reciprocal. My finances were stable and growing. My career was thriving because I was free to focus on my own goals instead of constantly managing other people's crises. I'd learned to recognize manipulation and set boundaries. I'd discovered what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. The golden child had become a real person, working hard and taking responsibility for his choices. The family bank was permanently closed, and the people who'd run it were learning to live with the consequences of their financial crimes. And Marcus Wilson, the forgotten son, the walking ATM, the family safety net, had finally learned to live for himself. On my 29th birthday, I threw a small party in my apartment. Jake was there, along with Derek, Uncle Robert, my grandmother, and a few close friends from work. There was cake, chocolate, with 29 candles that I got to blow out myself. There were gifts chosen specifically for me by people who actually knew what I liked. There was laughter and conversation, and the easy warmth of people who genuinely cared about each other. No one demanded I give up my car. No one tried to guilt me into funding someone else's dreams. No one treated my birthday as an inconvenience to be endured while celebrating someone else. For the first time in my adult life, I was surrounded by real family. The kind you choose, the kind built on love and respect rather than financial dependency and emotional manipulation. As I looked around at the faces of people who saw me as Marcus, the person, rather than Marcus, the resource, I realized that my parents' ultimatum had been the best gift they'd ever given me. They'd forced me to choose between my dignity and their dysfunction, and I'd chosen correctly. The golden child era was over. The family bank was closed forever, and Marcus Wilson was finally truly free to build the life he deserved. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting out and building something better from the ashes of what you left behind.